I finished up everything underneath the car, so I went ahead and took it off the ramps, which makes reaching over a little easier, though maybe it's a little too low. I have a helper now. What I'm going to do is start taking the fuel system off the car. I'll probably go ahead and disconnect the battery and get all this removed. I might also start wiring the ECU a little bit just to get the crank sensor and the power all hooked up. Let me grab some tools. Always find it good practice to remove the ground first and put the ground on last. And my reasoning behind that is so that if the wrench hits, say, the metal here or something, it won't spark. Actually pretty clean, not corroded. Let's put this up here. I think I'm probably going to replace these battery terminals with ones that have studs coming up off of them, and then put, this one already has a ring terminal on it, but put a large copper ring terminal on the battery wires. And my reasoning for that is that I'm probably going to have to add a relay or two that doesn't go through this fuse panel or some of the higher nugget. Yeah, I'm going to have to add relays to some of the higher current things, like maybe the fuel pumps or the ignition coil, just because I'd like this to be switched on a relay. But if the fuel pumps draw, there's two of them on this car. I'm not sure really what they draw right now. I have to look into it, but if it's 20 amps, I don't want to run this fuse panel off a 30 amp relay and then also have 20 amps going to the fuel pumps. Where the ignition coils, they can draw a lot of power momentarily while they're charging. This does seem to work decently, but kind of interesting how they did that. Not sure why, because they mounted a little distribution block right here. So I'm not sure why they decided to run wires directly from there, or where they go. Seems to be a bit of a mystery. Well, I'm not concerned with that right now. Yeah. Let's move on to the mechanical stuff. Not entirely sure what holds all this stuff on here. Alright, I've taken all the injector lines off of the injector side anyways, thinking they're all going to lift up with the whole system, but we'll see. As far as I can tell, it's held down with, looks like 4 of these nuts I took off. One here, one there, there. And this one is tucked underneath of, I believe this is the pressure regulator that the computer uses to change the system pressure. This is what makes it a K-jetronic, I think. Pretty certain that's what this is. This car was working. It was running. Like I said, just the Excel enrichment wasn't very good, and sometimes randomly it would run rough. So we'll figure it out. Looks like I went ahead and dropped the bolts for that down there, so we'll get that later. Go ahead and take this last nut off here. See if I can drop. Yep. All right. So what you want to do is just make sure you drop everything you can down in the valley, and then try to fish it out later. This is like a hose clamp. Somehow it's 90 degrees. And I believe that's what holds some kind of air elbow. Go from the fuel metering unit to the throttle body that's actually down below. And it sits vertically. So I believe this has to come off. Not really sure if I'm doing anything. Feels loose. And I believe this is going to have to come off as well. This is the idle speed control motor. And now that I look at it, it's actually, that's before the throttle body. So it must be taking filtered air this way, and then it brings it through this assembly, which I believe is the cold start enrichment valve. It's kind of a electric injection valve that sprays, well, it would appear that it mixes extra fuel with the idle air, and then that actually is going to run through the plastic pipes and be fed to the air bleeds for the shrouded injectors. So I don't know if that's a reason why a lot of times these tubes here are not holding up. You buy new ones and they don't last very long. Maybe they've had a material change and they don't like the gasoline, or maybe the ethanol in the gasoline is destroying the rubber. Not too sure on that. It won't be an issue anymore, though that does mean I will not be able to use the factory idle air control motor. So it will definitely be without, at first anyways. I could probably stick like a Chevy, maybe like an LS throttle body on it, or a Ford throttle body. I'm not too sure if the Fords have the idle air control built on them or not. I'll have to check. But I've ran motors without idle air control, without idle speed control. It's not too big of an issue, really. I mean, you get a little bit of RPM drop when the AC compressor comes on, but I really haven't had much of an issue with it. And something you can do with the micro squirt is, or any of the mega squirt products, is you can actually just have the timing a little bit retarded from optimal at idle, and then you can open the throttle body a little bit more on a set screw. Just have it the closed position a little bit more open than you normally would, and then you can advance the ignition timing up and down to control the idle speed a little bit. And I'll have to demonstrate that because that might not sound or make sense. Okay, that's pretty cool. I've been talking to this guy Peter. He has a YouTube channel called Innova High Tech Limited, and he shows in detail how to completely service these cars and how to fix things like rebuilding the AC, automatic climate control, and servicing this whole fuel system. And he did mention how I was going to control the idle, and I kind of see what he's talking about now. It wasn't real apparent to me, but if I replace the injectors, there's not going to be any spot for the air to get into the manifold. That's not too big of an issue. There's actually other things I could do besides that. Besides swapping the entire throttle body or doing the timing thing, I could also just kind of put a solenoid in where it bleeds air to a vacuum port somewhere. You know, or I could drill and tap the manifold somewhere, or just tap into one of the vacuum lines. And basically, that's all these do anyhow, is let air pass the throttle body, so effectively being a vacuum leak. I'm not sure how this motor works exactly, but I believe it to be good because the car idled, had a good idle speed. It would rev up when it was cold, and then it would come down as it warmed up. So I don't know if these are worth any money, but if somebody needs one, this seems to be a good one, and the rubber seems to be in good shape. So I'll set it right there if anybody wants to get it. Just let me know. Let's see here. All right. The issue I see that may be, I'm not really certain how these ball and sockets come apart. The ones I'm used to, you pull a little sleeve back on it, and then it releases off the ball. And I could probably fight it out of there or take off all the lines on the distributor, but let's see if I can. If these just pop off, they might have like a little spring clip in them holding them. Get a better look at it. Alright, as you can tell, I got the, what do we call that, the fuel system off. Yeah, once I got that rod out of my way, it just popped off. Had a couple casualties. Well, you can tell here, even though I took the nuts off of these little mounts, oh, yep, they kind of broke. So I think probably just use some pliers and remove those. I can get to my bolts I dropped. Sorry. There. Take that. Put this together. Put this back on. Here's what this thing looks like. It's not really what I expected. It's all rubber on the bottom. It's sandwiched some sort of way. I imagine this is almost a irreplaceable part, but I could be wrong. And the fuel pressure regulator's vacuum line, I don't think this was hooked up to manifold vacuum, so that could have been some of the car's problem. I'm gonna have to look. It looks like something burnt underneath here, like looks like the fuse panel has some of those burnt connections. Probably should open the garage door, because I gotta tell you, the fumes this stuff is giving off. Starting to give me a headache. What do you think? He doesn't think much of anything. I don't see anything under here that would have... Oh, it's probably just from rubbing right there. So this manifold looks pretty good, I think. Once I get it cleaned up, and I don't know if it's painted or looks oddly shiny. I'm not certain what this device is. It's got 4 wires and a vacuum connection, which makes me think it's some kind of pressure sensor. Have to follow that and see where it goes. Something I do see is there's the EGR valve over there. That's this vacuum line. Let me just get that out of the way permanently. Where's this go? Goes to one of these thermal switches. EGR valve goes here. There's another line. So it just goes down there to the throttle body. Go ahead and file this away accordingly. There we go. I pulled that connector off and I noticed this is a wire. It's not a vacuum line, and it goes down the throttle body, so I kind of got excited. I was like, oh, it's got a throttle position sensor on it already. Maybe the later years had that, but no, it just, I don't think I can do this one-handed, but basically when the throttle's completely closed, it makes connection between this pin here and the center pin, and then once the throttle's opened, it breaks that connection, and then when the throttle is fully open, it makes connection with the center pin and this one on the left. So it's just a switch, or 2 switches, so that's not usable. So you pull the throttle body out of there and look at how to put a more conventional 0 to 5 volt potentiometer on it. I was just looking at these injector holes, kind of getting some ideas. I put some paint on this one, put it down in there just to see what feature actually stops it. And it looks like it's the little chamfer at this diameter change. I had one of these injectors on hand. This is an old one out of my Jeep, which I think is basically like old Ford style. This one's a Bendix Deca. And it just about it almost just works. Actually, I had the O-ring on it, and the O-ring does engage in that smaller diameter, but there's nothing really to stop it from going too far down, except it kind of binds up on this diameter here, and it seems to be really hard to get this style injector anymore. So I'm just going to continue with making some sort of bushing that goes in these. I'll have to get some dimensions and start drawing it up and see what it looks like. Thanks for watching. Bye.